What's up, peeps? Welcome back to Rebranding Safety. Today is another episode in our CDM kind of mini-series thingamajiggy. Today we're going to be talking about designers. What's up, peeps? Welcome back to Rebranding Safety. Rebranding Safety is a YouTube channel and podcast doing exactly what it says on the tin. So if you're new here, hit subscribe, hit the bell, blah, blah, blah. My name's James MacPherson. I have been the host of Rebranding Safety since it started, and I'm also the MD and founder of RiskFluent. RiskFluent is the consultancy business that sits behind Rebranding Safety. So if you need any help with this stuff that's still not making sense, then go to riskfluentltd.com and we can help you out. We're currently working on a couple of construction projects, which kind of started this, because ultimately, the understanding of CDM is a little bit confused, so we wanted to nail out some of the basics. So this is part of a mini series. Today we're going to be talking about designers. So if you missed the others, we've done an introduction, we've done the client, and we've done when is it notifiable, so make sure you go check them out as well. Or maybe you just stumbled across this video because you're looking for this very specific question: what the hell is a designer? Well, designers is a phrase used in so many job titles, and within construction projects or within industries there might actually be so many different people called designers. But a designer is somebody that designs essentially the construction project, right? So they're designing how we're going to build it, what it's going to look like, what goes where. So they'll draw like building drawing, building plans, building schematics, fire strategies. They're normally an organization or a business, could be an individual, but ultimately it's normally a business that kind of sits in that design role. And this organization may subcontract out. So fire strategies is a really good example. They might have their own fire engineer, or they might subcontract out, but that business that's been given the role of the designer, they'll come under the CDM duties of a designer. Sometimes you might have a series of designers, so you'll end up having a principal designer, and then you might have designers underneath that. So we're going to break down the duties of those. So under the CDM regulations, and if you don't know what they are, don't forget to go check out the introduction to CDM. So under these regulations, the designers have a number of duties. So the CDM regulation puts a duty on the designer to not accept a job if they can't do it. Don't accept the job if you don't have the capacity or the skills or the competence to actually do it within your competency. And this is really challenging for a lot of business owners. I've experienced this myself. We've had a couple of jobs come in where we're like, nah, not something we're really good enough for doing. So say, for example, I don't know, I got someone ring me up, say, James, I love what you talk about fire on the channel and on the podcast, so we want you to do a fire strategy. I'm not an engineer, sorry, I'm gonna have to give that to someone else. So understanding your own capabilities, but also your own capacity as well. Knowing if you've got enough people to actually deliver a project. So CDM puts a clear duty on knowing that you have the competence and the capacity to actually do the job. The designer has a duty to make sure that the client is aware of their duties within the regulations. So you're the first port of call to making sure that the client knows what they're talking about, knows that they have some duties. They can't just give it all to everyone else, so they have a responsibility. So you are not supposed to start the project unless you know that the client is aware of their duties in the regulations and that they're aware of the regulations as well. The designer has a duty, when they're designing whatever they're designing, to consider the principles of prevention. So essentially, any foreseeable risk for those that are working on the building will end up using the building, but also maintaining and cleaning the building that they've designed out. Whatever's foreseeable as a risk to them, they've designed it out. They've got rid of it. So a really good example of this is a high-rise building having kind of self-cleaning windows, or windows that can kind of flip. So they flip in, so you can clean them on the inside, flip them back out, done. Yeah. Beautiful example of a designer thinking about, I don't really want to put somebody outside of the building on these massive freaking ropes and shit. Let's just design a window that we can turn inside out and clean from the inside. Beautiful. You have a duty as a designer to think about this stuff and design out any of the foreseeable risks. Part of the above regulation is also a requirement on you as a designer to ensure you get the right pre-construction information. Now, we're going to do a video on documentation, so make sure you check that out. But essentially, it's all the information of the existing building, the existing premises, the existing grounds, etc. from the client. And it might require some extra work, but pre-construction information is about making yourself aware of all the risks that are there currently. As a designer, you have a duty on you to make sure that all this information is passed to the right people, particularly principal designers and principal contractors, and make sure that the client is aware, like we've already said. You also have a duty to make sure that all the right information goes into the health and safety file that is a requirement once we finish a project that needs to get handed over to the client. And like I said, we're going to do a video on documentation as well. And finally, the designer has the duty to make sure that all the information that is needed for them to use, maintain and clean the building that you've designed is given to them, right? I know this sounds silly, but it's actually surprisingly hard to get this information a lot of the time. You have a duty on you to make sure that that information has gone over to the client, the end user, whoever it is, to make sure that they know how to use the building, maintain the building and clean the building. This would also apply to any other duty holders and stakeholders that have an interest or a stake within that premises as well. Okay then, so then we have principal designers. More often than not, these are the same people, the same organization, right? But the principal designer, in addition to the above, has some specific duties as well. It's the principal designer's role and duty to assist the client with obtaining that pre-construction information. And then so far as within the control of you as the principal designer, you have a duty to make sure that that is passed on to the other stakeholders within the process, such as contractors, principal contractors, and so on. And that should be done promptly. It should be done within a reasonable time frame. You know, it shouldn't be late. The project should not go ahead even though we're not sure whether it's got asbestos or anything. So it should be done as soon as it's ready, as soon as you've got it, pass it down the line. The principal designer has the duty to make sure that the designers as a whole are doing what they need to do, and you have to make sure that everybody is cooperating within the notion of that project team, particularly in the pre-construction phase. So the pre-construction phase is when we're designing everything. This is where the designers are all in before it goes over to kind of construction phase, where the principal contractors and contractors, which we'll do a video on, take over. But ultimately the pre-construction phase is the baby of the designers, and they need to make sure as principal designers that everybody is cooperating within this project for this pre-construction phase. The principal designer should have a very close relationship with the principal contractor, and they should be pretty much hand in hand, 100% cooperating with each other. And whilst that principal designer is in place, so before we kind of move over into the real design construction phase and they start to phase out, this principal designer should really be the conduit of information to the principal contractor, and they should both have a really clear focus on how we are managing the risks of this project, how we are managing the health and safety of this project. Any pre-construction information, designs, etc. should be going over to that principal contractor, and they should be cooperating really nice and smoothly. When this works, it works really well. When it doesn't work, it's a freaking nightmare. So the principal designer never really goes away, but they definitely kind of phase out a little bit and then come back. But essentially, that health and safety file is the responsibility of that principal designer to hand over to the contractor to finalize and confirm and get it over to the client. This is very often why the principal designer and the principal contractor sometimes in big projects tend to be the same company, but ultimately when they're not, it can get a bit like sometimes the principal designer just goes, boom, I'm done, your building now, nothing to do with me, I'm off, and that's not great, but ultimately it's kind of is what it is. But they do have a duty to make sure that the health and safety file is handed over to the client, and part of that means that the contractor will have to finalize and confirm that. We're going to talk about health and safety file and documentations, our experiences in another video, so go and check that out. So in a nutshell, the designers and principal designers are the people that design the building, design the project. They are the people right at the beginning that do loads and loads of work on the pre-construction phase, getting everything ready, managing those foreseeable risks, and really hand in hand working with the client and then the contractors to get this project up and running. Like I've said throughout the video, when this works, it works really well. If you're a client watching this, my advice to you would be find out your duties. We've done a video on the client, so go and check. Just don't hand this over to the principal designers and just go, well, I'm cool, I'll let you know when I'm happy with it at the end, 2 years down the line. You have a lot of duties as a client, so get your hands on the principal designers, the principal contractors, and really lead this project. Your principal designers should be your best mate, and they normally are when they do a really good job, but when it falls apart, it's a very complex process of loads of different companies working together, it can become a nightmare. Principal designers, like I say, there are ones out there that are really good, and there are ones out there that are the same as any profession. Find yourself a good principal designer. If you are a principal designer watching this, to find out your duties, please be a good principal designer, because we need more of them. And finally, just one last note, particularly when it comes to fire safety, but when it comes to any type of risk management, there is a big difference between ticking the box compliance and an effective, safe project delivering an effective, safe building. They are two very different things, and there is no harm in getting an outside opinion, particularly a safety professional. This is not an advert to use us, but obviously we could do it for you. But if you've got a safety professional, get them in the room at the design stage. They can act as a really powerful, really helpful, fresh set of eyes that are kind of unbiased. They're there on behalf of the client normally, but ultimately having a couple of safety professionals, one from the principal designer maybe, one from the contractor, one from the client, it feels like there's a lot of bodies in the room, but when it works well, having a couple of safety professionals in there, they're going to have to deal with this afterwards, from the client perspective, is really, really helpful. Getting some fresh eyes, good cognitive diversity in that room, working together, it won't go better than that. But if you're all just trying to tick the box and say, yep, I need this and that's it, and I've talked about this several times in the podcast, so I won't do it anymore, but ultimately just ticking a box, not focusing on delivering a safe project that's reasonably and practicably managed, and not focusing on delivering a safe property as opposed to a compliant property, then for me, you're doomed before you start. Thanks for watching. Like I say, go to riskfluentlimited.com if you want any support with this stuff. That's riskfluentltd.com, because all of the rebranding safety stuff's gone over there as well. So all the merch, we're still selling the merch. You get yourself some flat peak caps, you get yourself some t-shirts, some hoodies, jumpers. Those that have got them have said they're really high quality. We don't really make any money out of them. It's more just a brand exercise. It's a bit of fun, really. Otherwise, everything you need from us is at riskfluentlimited.com. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to check out the podcast as well. We've done a couple of stuff on construction, but we could do some more. So if you are a CDM expert and you're watching this, then give us a bell, because we'd like to get real in-depth, get some stories around CDM on the podcast as well. Otherwise, I'll catch you next week. Safe.